It started with a quiet security review inside Kensington Palace routine on paper, but deeply unsettling behind closed doors. By sunrise, senior aides were whispering about revoked access codes, restricted corridors, and a decision William, Prince of Wales, allegedly made without warning even the king. But what truly stunned palace insiders was not the action itself. It was the name attached to the restriction order, Queen Camilla. And according to reports swirling through royal circles, the concerns raised were serious enough to trigger immediate intervention. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the situation was dismissed by some palace aides as another exaggerated internal adjustment, the kind of quiet procedural review that rarely escaped beyond royal corridors. But insiders now whisper that this was something entirely different. Reports suggest the Kensington Palace Security Division had flagged what were described internally as sensitive movement concerns connected to private residential zones linked directly to the Wales family. The wording itself reportedly alarmed senior staff because such language was rarely used unless there were fears involving confidentiality, household boundaries, or influence over protected family operations. And according to various interpretations emerging from palace administrative circles, the concerns did not remain buried inside routine paperwork for very long. They allegedly reached William during a late-night security briefing that insiders claim lasted far longer than expected. What happened in that room has never been publicly disclosed. Yet those familiar with Kensington's internal structure insist the atmosphere shifted immediately afterward. By the following morning, instructions were allegedly issued with startling speed. Entry permissions were quietly updated. Several access pathways were reportedly restricted. Security staff were instructed to review guest clearance records going back months. And most shocking of all, Camilla's previously unrestricted access to parts of Kensington Palace was allegedly suspended pending further review. Palace aides, according to whispers later shared with royal correspondents, were left stunned by both the severity and urgency of the decision. Some reportedly believed the restriction action would remain temporary, a short-term measure designed to cool tensions behind the scenes. But others immediately recognized something much larger unfolding beneath the surface. Because Kensington Palace had long represented far more than a residence. It was the operational heart of William and Catherine's future monarchy. And insiders claim William had become increasingly determined to protect that space from what he allegedly viewed as expanding external influence. Reports suggest Catherine, Princess of Wales, strongly supported the idea of reinforcing what aides privately described as a protective boundary around their household, particularly where Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were concerned. Those close to the Wales circle allegedly feared that too many overlapping loyalties still existed within palace staffing systems, creating an atmosphere where influence could travel quietly through conversations, scheduling decisions, and informal access rather than official channels alone. The deeper the review reportedly went, the more uneasy senior insiders allegedly became. Media figures who cover the monarchy soon began noticing strange disruptions as well. Several planned private visits connected to senior royals were quietly cancelled without explanation. Administrative meetings were reportedly rescheduled at the last minute. And palace journalists began hearing repeated whispers that tensions between William and Camilla had been worsening for months behind closed doors, far beyond what the public had ever been allowed to see. Some insiders even claimed the king himself had not anticipated the scale of William's response once the security concerns reached his desk. And that detail alone transformed palace anxiety into genuine alarm because it suggested the future king was beginning to act with a level of independence that could no longer be quietly restrained by tradition, hierarchy, or family sensitivities. But the real crisis wasn't just about revoked access, it was about what security officials allegedly feared Camilla was still trying to control inside the future king's inner circle. For years, Kensington Palace had operated like a carefully balanced fortress, where smiles masked rivalries and protocol concealed power struggles. Yet insiders now claim that balance finally shattered when William, Prince of Wales, began quietly restructuring who could influence his household and who could not. What once looked like harmless royal friction was suddenly being described as an internal Cold War, one involving loyalty, succession, and the future authority of the crown itself. According to reports emerging from palace circles, the tensions between William's camp and the circles surrounding Queen Camilla had been building long before the security restrictions ever became public whispers. But everything allegedly intensified after the health struggles facing King Charles III began reshaping the monarchy's balance of power behind closed doors. As the king reportedly reduced portions of his workload and senior royals quietly adapted to an uncertain future, insiders claim William became increasingly protective over Kensington Palace and the people operating within it. What had once functioned as a shared royal environment slowly transformed into something much more strategic, an independent power base designed around the future reign of William and Catherine. And according to those familiar with internal palace dynamics, that transition did not happen without resistance. Reports suggest William had grown deeply wary of what insiders allegedly described as outside influence around his children, household operations, and private scheduling systems. While no formal accusations were ever made publicly, royal commentators began noticing a visible shift months earlier. Certain advisors reportedly lost proximity to the Wales household. Long-standing informal channels allegedly became harder to access. Meetings that once flowed through overlapping royal offices were quietly redirected through tighter internal structures controlled directly by Kensington staff loyal to William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Behind the scenes, however, insiders whisper that Camilla's network within palace administration remained far more influential than many realized. According to various interpretations circulating among royal correspondents, Camilla allegedly maintained strong informal relationships across staffing systems, private advisors, and operational circles tied to Buckingham Palace. Some insiders claim those networks were originally tolerated in the spirit of maintaining unity around Charles during difficult years, but as William's position strengthened, the future king reportedly began viewing overlap loyalties as a growing risk rather than a manageable inconvenience. That fear allegedly became even more pronounced when it involved Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Reports suggest Catherine strongly favored tightening privacy protections around the children, particularly as media pressure intensified and palace tensions quietly escalated. Insiders claim she became increasingly determined to shield their household from what she allegedly viewed as unnecessary interference, distractions, and internal maneuvering. And according to whispers now spreading through royal commentary circles, William fully supported that approach. In fact, some commentators speculate the heir to the throne had already started distancing himself from Camilla's advisors months before the Kensington Security Review ever took place. Invitations reportedly changed. Communication pathways allegedly narrowed. Even routine coordination between households became noticeably more rigid. But what truly alarmed palace insiders was how far the security measures eventually expanded. Reports suggest the reviews moved beyond physical access and into communications oversight, scheduling protocols, 3. Internal briefings and information sharing procedures. That escalation allegedly sent shockwaves through palace staff, many of whom suddenly found themselves navigating invisible loyalty lines behind closed doors. Some insiders claim staff members were quietly pressured to prove where their allegiance truly stood. Others allegedly feared making the wrong administrative move at the wrong time could end careers overnight. And as tensions deepened, the atmosphere inside royal operations reportedly became colder, quieter, and far more divided than the public could possibly imagine. Yet despite the growing unease, palace officials continued publicly presenting an image of stability, unity, and calm continuity. But according to insiders, that carefully managed illusion was already beginning to fracture under pressure. And while the palace publicly insisted everything remained harmonious, insiders claim one explosive incident forced William to stop managing the tension quietly and act decisively instead. The turning point reportedly came during what should have been an ordinary royal family coordination meeting. But according to whispers emerging from Kensington corridors, something or perhaps something discovered changed the atmosphere instantly. Within hours, security teams were allegedly reviewing logs, Aides were pulled into emergency consultations, and William, Prince of Wales's office moved with chilling precision. Whatever happened inside that meeting, insiders claim it convinced the heir to the throne that boundaries had been crossed. At first, palace officials reportedly attempted to treat the situation as a simple scheduling disagreement. The kind of internal confusion that occasionally surfaced when multiple royal households operated simultaneously during periods of heightened pressure. But insiders now claim the issue ran far deeper than conflicting calendars or administrative overlap. According to reports circulating among royal correspondents, the real concern allegedly centered around a sensitive scheduling matter involving the Wales children. While exact details remain closely guarded, whispers suggest questions emerged over who had access to certain private family movements, internal planning discussions, and confidential household arrangements connected to Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. And for William, insiders claim that discovery changed everything. Those familiar with Kensington operations allege the future king had already been uneasy for months about the growing complexity of palace information channels. But during this particular meeting, reports suggest evidence may have surfaced indicating that private family matters were traveling through circles William no longer trusted. Some insiders describe tense disagreements erupting behind closed doors over who had authority to access confidential scheduling information and why certain details had allegedly reached advisors outside William's immediate structure. Others claim the atmosphere inside the room became so strained that aides were later instructed not to discuss what had taken place under any circumstances. Whatever the truth may be, palace administrative streams reportedly reacted with unusual speed afterward. Security officials allegedly began reviewing visitor permissions, communication pathways, and internal coordination records connected to Kensington Palace operations. Access histories were reportedly examined line by line. Certain scheduling systems allegedly underwent immediate restriction updates. And according to insiders familiar with the process, the scale of the review suggested William believed the problem was no longer isolated or accidental. Reports claim he became furious over what aides privately described as unauthorized influence attempts surrounding his household. Though no public accusations were ever made, whispers quickly spread that William believed invisible power networks were still operating too closely around his family's private affairs. That belief, insiders say, transformed quiet frustration into decisive action. Several figures reportedly associated with Camilla's administrative circles suddenly found themselves sidelined during emergency discussions. Long-standing informal communication channels allegedly went silent overnight. Some advisors reportedly lost involvement in matters they had previously helped coordinate without issue. Behind the scenes, palace staff allegedly began recognizing that the balance of influence within royal operations was changing rapidly, and not everyone would emerge from that shift untouched. Meanwhile, observers watching the royal family in public reportedly noticed subtle but unmistakable tensions surrounding Catherine, Princess of Wales in the day. So that followed. Though palace appearances continued as scheduled, insiders claim Catherine appeared increasingly guarded while maintaining her usual composure. Reports suggest she remained deeply focused on protecting stability around her children, while William intensified efforts to tighten household control behind closed doors. As pressure mounted, several palace engagements were quietly adjusted, reassigned, or restructured without public explanation. Royal journalists began noticing unusual separation between William's team and the office surrounding Queen Camilla, with coordination that once appeared seamless suddenly becoming distant and rigid. Commentators who had previously dismissed rumors of internal division reportedly started reconsidering whether something far more serious had been unfolding beneath the monarchy's carefully maintained public image all along. And according to insiders now speaking in cautious whispers, the meeting that triggered the crisis did more than expose's tension. It allegedly convinced William that protecting his future reign required drawing a line that could no longer be ignored, softened, or delayed. But behind the scenes, insiders whisper that William's next move was already being prepared, and it would send a message no senior royal could possibly misunderstand. Then came the move that transformed private palace tension into full-scale royal shock. According to multiple interpretations circulating through royal administrative circles, William, Prince of Wales authorized what aides allegedly described as a security sovereignty review over Kensington operations. It sounded bureaucratic, but the consequences were devastating. Access pathways changed, permissions vanished, and one of the monarchy's most powerful figures reportedly found herself standing outside a system she once moved through freely. By that stage, insiders claim William had stopped viewing the situation as a temporary disagreement that could be managed quietly through compromise and royal diplomacy. Reports suggest he had become convinced that Kensington Palace required a far more aggressive internal restructuring if his household was going to remain protected from what aides allegedly called cross-channel influence. And according to palace whispers, the future king moved with a level of precision that shocked even some of his closest advisors. The operation reportedly received an internal nickname almost immediately: the Kensington Shield. On the surface, it appeared to be a straightforward security modernization effort. But behind palace walls, insiders understood it as something much larger. It was allegedly the formal beginning of William reclaiming total authority over the operational structure surrounding his family, his residence, and eventually, his future reign. Security permissions and guest clearances were reportedly reassessed line by line in a process described by some palace aides as cold, surgical, and relentless. Long-standing assumptions about access suddenly no longer applied. Individuals who had once moved freely through overlapping royal spaces allegedly found themselves facing delays, restrictions, or silent removal from internal pathways altogether. And at the center of the storm stood Queen Camilla. According to multiple reports circulating through royal commentary circles, Camilla's access status within certain Kensington operations was quietly downgraded pending what officials allegedly referred to as review procedures. No public explanation emerged. No official conflict was acknowledged. Yet insiders insist the message inside palace corridors was unmistakable. Several long-standing informal privileges reportedly disappeared almost overnight. Certain coordination channels allegedly closed entirely. Even aides connected to Camilla's wider administrative network were reportedly instructed to redirect communications through newly tightened structures controlled directly by William's office. For some within the monarchy, the move allegedly felt unprecedented. Palace insiders began describing it not simply as a security adjustment, but as a direct assertion of William's future authority over the institution itself. Reports suggest the Prince of Wales wanted absolute clarity regarding who controlled Kensington Palace, who influenced his household, and who would no longer be permitted to operate within blurred lines of access and loyalty. And according to insiders, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood fully aligned beside him throughout the process. Those close to the Wales household claim Catherine had become increasingly focused on strengthening household independence, particularly where the privacy and stability of her children were concerned. The deeper palace tensions grew, the more redetermined she allegedly became to create clear boundaries around her family's environment. That unity between William and Catherine reportedly gave the restructuring even greater force behind the scenes. Senior aides allegedly received direct warnings against leaking internal discussions as the atmosphere inside Kensington became increasingly tense. According to whispers from royal administrative staff, fear spread quickly throughout palace operations. Some employees reportedly worried they were being quietly monitored for divided loyalties. Others allegedly feared accidental involvement in internal power struggles they no longer fully understood. And as details slowly leaked into royal media circles, commentators began drawing comparisons between William's actions and the famously rigid enforcement style long associated with Princess Anne. Like Anne, insiders claimed William appeared willing to prioritize institutional discipline over personal comfort, family sensitivity, or public optics. That realization reportedly unsettled far more people than the public realized, because it suggested the future king was no longer preparing cautiously for power. He was already beginning to exercise it. But while Kensington tightened its walls, Buckingham Palace reportedly entered crisis mode because the fallout was now threatening to reach King Charles III himself. As whispers of the Kensington restrictions spread through royal circles, attention quickly turned toward one man, King Charles III. Already burdened by illness, constitutional pressure, and a fragile public image, the king now reportedly found himself trapped between his wife and his heir. And according to palace insiders, the emotional weight of that conflict began quietly reshaping relationships at the very top of the monarchy. At first, reports suggest Charles hoped the entire situation could be resolved quietly, far away from public scrutiny and royal headlines. Those close to Buckingham Palace allegedly believed the growing tension between William, Prince of Wales, and Queen Camilla could still be softened through private discussions, carefully managed compromise, and traditional royal restraint. But insiders now claim the crisis had already moved beyond the point of simple reconciliation. The restrictions surrounding Kensington Palace were no longer being viewed internally as temporary adjustments or emotional reactions. Instead, they allegedly represented something far more dangerous to the monarchy's delicate balance, a visible fracture between the present reign and the future one. Palace advisors reportedly became deeply concerned about what might happen if details surrounding the internal conflict reached the public in full force. According to whispers from administrative circles, senior figures feared the exposure of such divisions could severely damage the image of unity the monarchy had spent years carefully protecting, especially during Charles's already difficult period of illness and reduced public stability. Some insiders allegedly described the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace as tense, exhausted, and increasingly fragile. Every decision suddenly carried emotional consequences. Every internal conversation reportedly felt loaded with political meaning. And at the center of it all stood Charles, attempting to preserve peace between two forces that no longer appeared willing to step backward. Reports suggest pressure quietly mounted on William to soften the restrictions or at least scale back portions of the Kensington Review. Yet, according to palace insiders, future king refused. Those familiar with the situation claim William had become convinced that reversing course would undermine the authority he believed necessary to protect his family and secure the independence of his household moving forward. In private, insiders whisper that he allegedly viewed compromise at that stage as weakness rather than diplomacy. That determination reportedly stunned many within royal operations because it marked a dramatic shift in William's approach. For years, he had often been portrayed as measured, cautious, and careful not to deepen existing family fractures. But now, commentators claim something had changed. The future monarch no longer appeared focused on preserving comfort inside the institution. He appeared focused on controlling it. Meanwhile, figures aligned with Camilla allegedly reacted with growing anger and disbelief behind closed doors. Reports suggest some of her allies viewed the restrictions as deeply humiliating, unnecessary, and politically damaging. According to palace whispers, several within her wider circle privately questioned whether William's actions had crossed from security management into open territorial assertion. But despite the frustration reportedly spreading through those networks, insiders claim Charles struggled to fully challenge his son's authority. That internal conflict allegedly became one of the most emotionally painful burdens facing the king. On one side stood loyalty to his wife. On the other stood the undeniable reality that William was the future of the monarchy, and increasingly, he was beginning to act with the confidence of someone who understood exactly where power was heading next. Throughout the turmoil, reports suggest Catherine, Princess of Wales, and William remained intensely focused on shielding Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis from the emotional fallout unfolding behind palace walls. Insiders claim protecting stability around the children became the couple's highest priority as tensions escalated. At the same time, senior courtiers allegedly began preparing for what many now believed was inevitable. A far more independent Wales structure operating with greater separation from Buckingham Palace influence. Royal commentators increasingly describe the situation not merely as a family disagreement, but as a symbolic shift in power dynamics within the use of Windsor itself. Because beneath the silence, beneath the carefully managed statements and rehearsed appearances, insiders now believed the monarchy was quietly entering a new era, one where the future king was no longer waiting patiently for authority to arrive. And as the palace fought to contain the whispers, Insiders claim one final decision made it unmistakably clear that William was no longer waiting for the future, he was already acting like king. By the time the dust began to settle, Kensington Palace no longer felt like shared royal territory. According to reports now echoing across royal commentary circles, William, Prince of Wales, had transformed it into something far more controlled, far more guarded, and far more personal. The message, insiders whisper, was unmistakable. The era of blurred influence was ending, and those once accustomed to unrestricted access would now answer to a different authority entirely. What had once operated as one interconnected royal environment was now increasingly being described as a protected stronghold built around William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Reports suggest the changes unfolding inside Kensington Palace were no longer viewed internally as temporary security responses tied to one isolated incident. Instead, palace observers allegedly began seeing them as the foundation of a much broader transformation taking place quietly within the monarchy itself. According to insiders, William had become determined to create a household structure that answered directly to him, free from overlapping influence, competing loyalties, and the invisible tensions that had reportedly defined royal operations for years. And with each passing week, that structure allegedly grew stronger, more disciplined, and increasingly independent from Buckingham Palace traditions that once shaped it. Royal commentators now claim Kensington Palace has started evolving into something closer to a future royal court than a secondary residence. Reports suggest discussions surrounding future operational changes may further separate household systems, staffing structures, and internal advisory channels connected to the Wales family. Some insiders even whisper that long-term planning is already underway for a monarchy centered around tighter loyalty frameworks and far stricter household boundaries than those maintained during previous reign. As for many watching the situation unfold, William's actions reportedly reinforced his image as a decisive future monarch, willing to make difficult choices regardless of personal discomfort or public sensitivity. While critics allegedly viewed the restrictions as cold and excessive, supporters within royal circles quietly praised what they described as a necessary assertion of authority during a period of uncertainty around the crown. Throughout the turmoil, Catherine reportedly remained focused on one overriding priority: stability around her children. According to those close to the Wales household, she allegedly viewed the restructuring not as political maneuvering, but as protection. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were said to remain at the center of every major decision shaping Kensington's increasingly guarded atmosphere. Insiders claim Catherine believed maintaining emotional calm and household privacy around the children had become essential as royal tensions intensified behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the growing reduction of Queen Camilla's influence around Kensington continued fueling speculation across royal commentary circles. Reports suggest figure ES once closely connected to Camilla's wider administrative presence found themselves operating with less visibility, less access, and far less confidence about their standing within the future structure of the monarchy. And while no formal public acknowledgement of division ever emerged, palace observers increasingly framed the situation as part of a much larger transfer of power taking shape inside the House of Windsor. According to insiders, the security concerns surrounding Kensington ultimately became the public-facing justification for a deeper internal restructuring already gathering momentum behind palace walls. What began as whispers about permissions and protocols had allegedly evolved into something far more consequential. A battle over authority, succession, and who would shape the monarchy's future once Charles's reign inevitably came to an end. Royal commentators now suggest the conflict symbolized more than tension between individuals. It represented two competing visions of royal power colliding inside one institution. One rooted in old networks, inherited relationships, and gradual influence. The other built around tighter control, disciplined loyalty, and a future. King determined to secure his household before securing the throne itself. And according to insiders, that shift may already be impossible to reverse. Because inside the House of Windsor, insiders now whisper that the greatest royal battles are no longer fought in public ceremonies, but behind guarded doors, revoked permissions, and the silence that follows power being quietly taken away. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.